Welcome back to Season 6 of the Group Practice Accelerator podcast, brought to you by Polaris Healthcare Partners, where we leverage decades of healthcare and business experience to drive growth in successful group practices just like yours. If you're a healthcare entrepreneur and you're interested in building, scaling, or exiting your group practice, you've found not only the industry's leading resource for business education, but a team of trusted advisors dedicated to helping you achieve and exceed your goals. In short, the team at Polaris creates clarity, confidence, and results. I'm your host, Jamie Falash, and the Group Practice Accelerator podcast is on the air. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me again this week because I've got a special treat for you. Now, to set this up, I'll say that on this show, we talk a lot about operations, right? Because that is really what's at the heart of your foundation. That's how you grow as a group. That's how you go from 1 or 2 locations to 3, 5, 7, 10, 20, 50, and more. You've got to have a strong foundation, a solid footing in order for that to happen. And as I've mentioned on some recent shows, oftentimes what founders don't see coming are the speed bumps that come along with adding location 3, 5, 7, 10. So unless you have really solid footing at location 1 or 2, you will experience some of these stumbling blocks that come along the way. We want to help you see those. And there's someone within our organization that sees this all the time, and that's Aidan Bradley. He's worked in multi-site for many years. So he's got experience under his belt, real hands-on experience. So he knows what goes on in that day-to-day that can impact your bottom line really quickly because it kind of can sneak up on you. So what I've got for you today are some little gems, so to speak, from Aidan Bradley, our fractional COO and strategic consulting executive. He is hands-on within these locations. He works directly with founders to make sure that they are on solid footing before they grow. So enjoy today's show, and I'm going to challenge you. I'd like you to write down 3 takeaways from today's clips, and there will be many more than 3, but really think through what Aidan is saying in some of these clips that we put together for you here today, because we wanted to bring together Aidan's observations, and those are going to be really valuable to you. So let us know what your 3 takeaways are. Plenty to choose from. Enjoy today's episode. I want to pick your brain on a number of items here because, we all know as the industry continues to consolidate that these practices who are looking to expand, they've got to get just a heck of a lot more efficient to compete with the big groups. And I know you and I are going to talk about a little bit why that is and how they can do that. But if we look at that in terms of your team, not just your associates, but your entire team, recruitment, case presentation, cost containment, streamlining operations, which I know you are expert on, but it's the little, like the subtle, the small inefficiencies that become just massive gaps and really detrimental to cash flow as we scale if you don't get a handle on them yesterday. So I'm glad you're here because I know you have a lot to say on this. So if we look at how consolidation is accelerated and more practices are joining structured groups, structured entities backed by private equity, it's really challenging to be competitive. And that's what we mean by being competitive. How do we attract the right people? How do we run optimally? Can we talk about some of the elements that impact whether or not we're competitive?
Yeah, of course. I think it's a great lead in. And I think starting out with market consolidation is a really good segue because of that, it is impacting smaller groups that are, single owned or maybe a couple partners and are trying to grow. And because of this acceleration, you might say, well, I'm ahead of it. And I'm here to say that you're not ahead of it. These DSOs in private equity backed groups, they are expanding aggressively. They're getting more and more aggressive. They're looking to deploy capital. And DSO used to be a dirty word. And I think now we're learning that there are a lot of different groups that are looking to have a bona fide strategic partnership with some groups. This is not just I want to buy you and change everything. This is I want to partner with you.
Exactly.
But if you are not scaling and centralizing and improving, these are 3 bullet points that I can kind of send the first warning shot out. 1, if you're not already experiencing this, is losing talent to better paying, better structured organizations.
Mm.
And why are they able to pay better? Because they run more efficiently and can reinvest some of those savings into attracting and retaining top talent. Okay. Also, the ability to miss out on acquisition or other partnership opportunities within your own group because they are very aggressive getting there first, right? They have a
Mhm.
vision, they have a value add, they have a prospectus, and they're creating to a potential seller or partner an actual economic outcome for them that benefits them. And then the last one is genuinely getting priced out of the competitive markets.
Yeah.
As consolidation occurs, as fewer single or small partnered groups exist, their ability to get max value declines because they don't have that leverage that they would have had in the beginning of that process. So because of that acceleration is where docs and owners really need to start to get more tightly wrapped in their business.
So let's talk about sustainability. When we're talking about scaling operations, what makes something sustainable?
So I think what you want to build early on is almost like a checklist.
Hmm.
And for our listeners that recall the cliches of wax on, wax off, and sand the floor, it always elicits a chuckle from both of us. However, if you really stop and think back to where those cliches came from, they were taught to somebody that didn't even realize they were being taught the fundamentals. Okay, so for those like, what is Aiden talking about? What's Jamie talking about? We're talking about the Karate Kid here, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
of course. Of
and and
course.
and the things that he was doing were the foundation of his mastery of karate, and he
Hmm.
didn't realize it, but it became so embedded that as he got better, he always went back to those core fundamental tactics. So when we talk about this checklist, our operational systems consistent across every location. Okay. And I say that because if we start to get a little bit loose with them, you become very loose with them as the organization gets bigger. You know, do we have the leadership depth to support more sites? And what I mean by that is, often we have a super GP or a doc and a really great office manager at one office, and we think this is great. We're just going to replicate at office 2 and 3, but those people can't be cloned. So
No,
are
sadly.
you measuring the proficiency and skill set and philosophy of your internal team? Do they all share your core values, and do you have a very regimented way that you provide dentistry? Many times we see some groups, and this is sort of counterintuitive, they get to a specific level, and the bigger they get, they actually become less profitable because they're not gaining scale. They're just simply building on that foundation extra layers.
No cross industry experience, very little outside influence. And suddenly we see those that have 3, 5, 7, 10, or even more offices hit a wall of what we're going to call unknowns. Yeah.
So how do we pack up what we're looking to do and find those known unknowns, but also the unknown unknowns? Because you start to bring in compliance exposure, you may be getting ready for M&A, you might have to have negotiations with contractors. These are things that are not done at a single office level. So you really start to bring in areas of scale, centralization, standardization, and more importantly, how do you replicate what you've done successfully in one office to another that is fact and data based and not just simply trying to emulate exactly what you have at office 1 or 2? But I will say that the more practices that you add on, it will be materially more difficult, Jamie, to have them doing the same amount of revenue in that ramp up as your flagship office because nothing is the same, right? If you've seen one office, you've seen one office. So office 3 and 4 doesn't have the owner there all the time. It doesn't have the same core group. So if you have been unable to sort of clone the archetype of what you're looking for and then hold them to a specific standard and invest in marketing and people and patient flow, you're simply going to have one or two offices dragging all the rest behind you. That's why you're less profitable. You'd be better off being a two or three office group than six or seven if you're not really committed to the centralization and standardization of core functions with a competent leadership team. It's generally a common denominator in why owners call us because something's missing in their organization. They just cannot put their finger on it. Like when I was one or two offices, things were great. Now I'm six and seven, and the wheels are coming off because we have not been able to scale processes, clinical excellence, culture, which is specifically what we're talking about. So those leaders, the owners, founders, and principals that prioritize trust, clinical autonomy, which is a big one, and team alignment over short-term decisions build stronger organizations. And I made a comment to you one time where what you do today, those one-offs become precedent.
Mhm.
And a strong culture and a good leader means sometimes saying yes or no, knowing that that is what's going to be precedent. And I always say the team members are watching. So I'll give you a perfect example. I see this where we have someone who's been there a while, they want an exception to a rule,
Mm.
right? And I always say if you say yes, that is your new policy.
Yeah.
That is your new precedent. Because if you say no to the next two or three people, they are going to refer back to that instance where you made an exception. And that exception down the road is going to cost you. Now, is that in every case? No, because there's exceptions to the exceptions. But in the grand scheme of things, if it really is only solving for the individual and it's not in the best interest of the organization and it's going to increase the burden on others, a good culture and good leadership makes tough decisions. And with that should accompany the why. I'm using this in air quotes if we don't show this part. The why.
Okay.
We can accommodate that because, or we can't accommodate that because. People may not always agree with the tough decisions, Jamie, but if they at least understand and we are transparent, they can respect it.
There's just so much, I think, when we grow from within that we're just not exposed to. It's not that it's anybody's fault, we just don't see it. So maybe we should start with that. When the leadership team is built from within, let's talk about some of the issues that that you have seen there in terms of blind spots and maybe some examples if you have some.
Yeah, I think, first to kind of touch back on the theme is that as these groups scale quickly, they have opportunities either for potential de novo or an acquisition. Often the leadership team are made up of internal team members.
Hmm.
They haven't had a chance to bring in outside perspectives yet. And this is where the blind spots start to show, particularly around operations, people, finance, even risk and compliance. We can kind of touch on this. So this episode is going to uncover where those gaps are and how an outside advisor can help close them and get their leadership team to be more aligned in building that group practice and exposing them to things that they just have not been exposed to. And as you mentioned earlier, they're great team members. They really know how that particular office runs, but that's a completely different scenario than trying to, add on two, three, four if, or more offices and be able to scale all of those processes and people across a group practice.
Well, if it's missing from the first few, it sure is heck going to be amplified in the rest of them. So, yeah, this is the time.
One statement that rings true that I will say is that if your leadership team is not empowered to lead, then you don't have a leadership team. You've got highly paid messengers. That's what you have.
Yeah,
And I kind of chuckled as I was looking at this as well, because I see this in a lot of areas where they say, well, I don't micromanage. And I'm like, well, you're in every meeting, so you do micromanage. And
absolutely.
really all that's happening is your leadership team is regurgitating what you said. And with some of the leaders, I said, listen, the reason that I'm advising not to be in there is because there's an unfair balance in the power authority, but the owner is always going to have the most influence. So, if we look back at the days when we were all young kids in school, remember when the principal used to come into the room and sit and watch the teacher and it's like we don't really behave this way. This like
No.
we're all told to be on our best behavior. and everybody's kind of looking at the principal, to gauge what the behavior is. And I use that anecdote because I've seen this where a general manager or an office manager or a director will be conducting a meeting with the owner in the room, and I watch this in real time, and everybody's kind of watching the reaction of the owner more than they're hearing the words, if that makes sense.
Oh,
And
yeah, it does.
so to me, what I have done is I've asked the owners to extract themselves from that meeting and then get a synopsis from the leader about what needs to be done, and that's when they can kind of war game it. Waiting too long equals profitability erosion. And the longer we remain stubborn in the past, the market is just going to run past us. And this is not just in dentistry. If you look at retail of any kind of business and think of the names that were huge growing up, Sears and Roebuck, J.C. Penney, all they're gone. And they're gone because they didn't keep up with the market trends. They did not keep up with where the consumer was. And when they finally realized where they needed to be, it was too late. They left them, right? So as we talk about this, someone might say, okay, I get this. And even the greatest cynic out there might say, okay, what do I do? Aiden, what do I do? Jamie, what do I do? Tell me. Well, first of all, they're doubling down on growth. And that growth is going to come from many different areas. They're adding operatories, as you said. They're building the de novos. They're acquiring other practices strategically. They have a vision. They have a target acquisition profile. They're launching specialty services. They're adding hygiene days. Many of these things you've already talked about. They're going to meet the patient where the patient is.
Well, I hope you enjoyed all of the little gems from Aiden Bradley today. I know what my 3 takeaways are, and I'd love to hear what yours are. And to all of you, we love the questions that you send us, so keep them coming, and we'll keep delivering the content that you ask for. As always, if you want to learn about any of our Polaris expert advisory services, or maybe there's a topic that we haven't covered that you'd like to hear about, you can send us an email to info@polarishealthcarepartners.com, and be sure to visit our website. Go up in that upper right-hand corner and click Contact Us. You're also going to find on our website weekly articles to grow and support your healthcare business, along with access to all of our podcast episodes and events and a whole lot more. Thanks so much for being a loyal listener and subscriber. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a colleague, and be sure to leave us a rating on any of your favorite podcast platforms. We'll see you on the next episode of the Group Practice Accelerator Podcast.